Howdy y'all, it's your favorite trainer with a belt buckle. Today we're going to help you pass the CSCS 4th edition. If you want to become a strength coach, you need this piece of paper. If you're not familiar with Show Up Fitness, it's where great trainers are made. I wrote the book, How to Become a Successful Personal Trainer. I interview a lot of successful strength coaches in this book, and it does begin with getting the CSCS, but it's missing hands-on experience. So that's ultimately what you need. So we encourage you to get through this 90 days max. Don't you dare be spending 6 months, 9 months. I've talked to people, read on blogs, spend a year studying. No, don't do that. Get our study guide. We have Zoom calls bi-weekly. We will get you through this within a couple months. We've had trainers that will go through this, get it within a month. You got this. Don't waste time learning all this esoteric information that's not going to be applied to your athletes. So let's get into the most important pages that you need to know for this exam. Number 1, I'm going to start out with page 26. Now, the reason I talk about this, because this is a lot of this stuff is very simple, but I forget that a lot of trainers don't have a very good foundation. So if you're going to do the CSCS, you probably have a background in kinesiology, a degree in kinesiology. You have to have that in 2030. For now, you just need a college degree. So if you don't know the basics with orientation, flexion, frontal plane, abduction, adduction, sagittal, we have flexion, extension behind. If you don't know the basic planes of motion and orientation, you're going to struggle with it. Any type of rotation is going to be transverse. Think of it like Star Wars. You remember in that scene in the garbage compactor, the wall is crushing me. If I'm crushed right here, any movement that happens is going to be sagittal. So it's going to be flexion at the humerus, extension of the humerus. At the hip, I'm in a flex position. We're sagittal creatures. Now, if I were to turn to the side and the wall were to crush my face and it were to crush back here, any movement would be frontal, which is abduction, adduction. Any type of rotation, like I was to clean glass like this, is going to be transverse. So those are the actions. And then you have the knee, flexion, extension. So no, page 27. Take a look at page 60, and you'll see a lot with the work to rest ratios. Memorize that. Now, bioenergetics, it's important stuff. You may just get a couple questions, so don't lose your shit over it. Just memorize that chart and knowing where athletes are. So Bolt, for example, or sprinter, 100, 200, any field athletes in track are all going to be primarily ATP PC. Fast glycolysis will be like a 400 meter plus. Sorry, 400 to 800. Once you start going above 800, you're going to be into the slow glycolysis and then oxidation. A marathon runner, long distance folk, they're going to be more type 1. They're more oxidative. All righty, hopefully you got that so far. Let's get into the next important page, which will be on page 295. They ask you a lot of questions based off of ranges for athletes. So you should have, and this is hard for dudes when they have a question about ladies, and it's hard for ladies when they ask questions about dudes. And so if you don't know what a good bench press is, so for one of our interns, for example, she's fairly strong. She's really strong. She can bench 135. And so in her mind, oh my gosh, Chris can bench press 275. That sounds like a lot. But if I'm a linebacker, that's weak. You need to know the norms for the average athlete on these pages on 295. So no softball, no volleyball, no the bench press, the squat, the power clean. You don't need to know every single one. I tell people to go off of the 70th percentile and above, so know those ranges. If you don't know a point guard in basketball who's 20 years old and he's bench pressing 165 pounds, it's not very good. So you want to be benching, you look at the basketball and you can find that 70% range, and he should be benching, 245, 255 and so forth. That would be a decent range for him. They will ask you a decent amount on form when it comes to power. You need to know where it goes within the programming, whether if it's resting measurements and so forth, but you need to know all these acute aspects on 406, the snatch, and also the power clean. They ask you about the upward movement, the different phase, the transitions. You need to know those specifics for those power movements. Looking at 440, This is program designed for resistance training. Now, this is kind of multifactorial because you need to know the outline for designing the program. So you do your needs analysis, which is looking at joint actions, the muscles, bioenergetics, and common injuries. But the selection, training frequency, exercise order, so just go off of that, find it in this chapter, and know it. So these are the examples that you're going to see primarily on the exam as well. You're going to see female 20-year-old, male 28-year-old, male 17. They like basketball and volleyball. They like football, like a linebacker position, and some type of runner. So you can see that you're going to have more type 2 recruitment, explosive anaerobic. You're going to have strictly strength and anaerobic for the football. And then you're going to have endurance and more type 1. So when you look at like 443, here's a needs analysis. You can look at the workouts that they would be using, what in which season they would be implementing and how many sets. So you should know the frequency, like on 442, and then 444, where the volume's going to be, 447, frequency per workouts, 448 when you're getting into the guidelines and the different split routines you would be doing. Just a decent chapter. Table 17.7, knowing the rep ranges, you forget, that seems like common sense, but if you don't know, 85% is roughly 5 reps. If you don't know, 75 is roughly 10 reps. That's just a couple questions that you can miss. And the last thing you want to do is miss it by 1 or 2 points. Let's get into, I think that is, we got one last one. Here we go. On page 588, knowing the periodization with volume intensity and where you're going to be focusing on technique. And so that's going to be highlighted on 590 with that table. You'll see a lot of questions of them asking you about volume in season versus post-season, out of season. Alrighty, so those are the most important pages that you need to know in the CSCS. Do not read it front to back. Don't do it. Our study guide will tell you what you're going to be tested on. We have weekly Zoom calls that help you with programming. We give you case examples, and you develop one through our advanced programming course. We want you to be successful. Passing this isn't going to make you successful. You need to get into the right mentorship, internship, where you have strength and conditioning professionals that have been doing this for a long time that can help you gain experience, and you can learn by doing. This is the first tiny little hurdle. We encourage our interns that go through our program to be going through an internship while they're studying. Do not, this is the 3rd time I'm saying it, you better listen to the guy who has bigger biceps than you. You do not spend more than 90 days doing this. If you have a strength and conditioning background, 1 month max, get it over with. You fail, who gives a shit? Take it again ASAP, because that's missed time. For example, athlete or student A, 9 months studying this. I'm going to tell my athletes what the size principle is and how a muscle contracts. And we're going to talk about sarcoplasmic reticulum, and your athlete's going to be like, who the fuck is this dude? We're not going to work with him. You don't have the buy-in. So that dude spends 9 months to a year memorizing all this stuff. He doesn't know how to communicate with athletes. And then he goes out there and tries to work with them, and he doesn't make it. Person 2, get a study guide. A month. 2, oh my God, you failed. A month, you know exactly what's going to be on it. So then you take it again, 2 months in now, you pass, and then you're learning how to work with people. 2 months later, you already have a legit internship. You're training, you're working with athletes 2 months later, so you're 6 months into the year, and you have a really good idea of how to work with that population. Maybe you start working with some injuries. Maybe you start working with tennis players. 6 months later, you are now very far into your strength and conditioning career, whereas other trainer, here we go, let me tell you about all the nerdy shit that you don't need. You need the nerdy shit within reason, but you also need the aspect of doing it in the practical part. So, Show Up Fitness, where great trainers are made, strength coaches, we will get you through this, guarantee you, 2 months. If you want to do 3 because you're freaked out and you're on imposter syndrome bullshit, we got you. Remember, favorite trainer with a belt buckle, check it out.